Ladies and gentlemen, hello, this is Debo over at Lansay Go, and we have another deck tech here for you today. This is a deck I like to call Mardu Reanimator, and it's actually an infinite combo deck, one that we kind of broke down a little bit in an article earlier on lansaygo.com, but it's focused around this card called Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle. Now Teshar is 3 and a white for a legendary bird cleric, and it's a 2/2 with flying, and it has the ability of whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And of course, artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are all historic. So this ability is very powerful. Being able to cast, an artifact and being able to bring back a 3-drop or less is going to be our main engine for this deck. So what is one of our main cards that we're going to be comboing with this card? Well, being able to put things into our graveyard or into exile or anything like that and be able to cast it again, that's exactly what Squee the Immortal is going to want to do. So for 1 red, we have a 2/1 legendary creature goblin that we can cast Squee the Immortal from our graveyard or from exile or from our hand. Now, we're going to be running 4 of both Teshar and of Squee, and in this deck that's going to be very important because we need to be able to hit these creatures. And especially with Squee, since we can always pitch them to the graveyard for value or sacrifice them for value, we can always cast them again later to trigger Teshar. Squee and Teshar are going to be our main combo engine here on how we can get through things. Now, how do we get Squee to the graveyard? And how do we get enough mana to be able to continually cast them over and over and over again in the same turn? Well, this is where our sacrifice effects come into play. So we're going to be running 4 Skirk Prospector. This card is going to really help this deck work, and it's going to be very important for you to be able to get onto the battlefield. And what's great about this is even if it dies, it's a single red for a 1/1 goblin that has the ability of sacrifice a goblin, add a red to your mana pool. Now we're going to be running 4 of these guys. Now, even if you play him early and he dies, oftentimes he's going to eat a shock or cast down or something like that. That's okay, because once we land our Teshar, we'll be able to cast a number of our spells to be able to bring it back from our graveyard to the battlefield and be able to combo off. So what's really resilient about this deck is even if things go to our graveyard, we can get them back with Teshar. Now, in addition to Skirk Prospector, we need other ways to produce mana. Well, we're going to be running 4 Goblin Instigator. Initially, I had tried Wily Goblin in this slot, but I think the additional Goblin creature token here is going to be more important, especially because when we combo off, this can become a win condition for us by getting infinite tokens, and this is one of our token generators that we're going to be running. But with Goblin Instigator, we get 2 goblins, and so if we sacrifice them to Skirk Prospector, we'll get 2 red for this 1 spell. And then if we're running something like Goblin Warchief, which causes all of our goblins to cost 1 less to cast, which we are running 4 of here, we will be able to reduce Squee's cost down to 2 mana. So using Skirk Prospector, we can sacrifice Goblin Instigator, and we can sacrifice Squee, and then we can cast Squee from our graveyard to return back the Goblin Instigator. Now, if we don't have a Goblin Instigator on the battlefield, we can also just, if we have a Goblin Warchief out, we can also just sacrifice the Skirk Prospector and do the same thing. And if we don't have the Warchief out, well, we can sacrifice both the Goblin token and the Instigator and Squee to get 3 red mana to be able to cast Squee from the graveyard and go infinite that way. Now, if we're going to be going infinite and creatures are going to be going in and out of our graveyard, well, how are we going to weaponize that? Judith the Scourge Diva. So for 1 black and a red, we get a legendary creature that's a 2/2, and it has the ability other creatures you control get +1/+L. And whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith the Scourge Diva deals 1 damage to any target. So Squee and then your Goblin Instigator or your Skirk Prospector are not creature tokens, so they'd be able to trigger Judith the Scourge Diva every single time they die. And being able to infinitely loop them back from the graveyard is going to be one of our fastest ways of winning this game. We're going to be running 3 of her. So I mentioned before that we could use Goblin Instigator to create infinite tokens, especially if we have a Warchief out to be able to reduce the mana cost of Squee. Well, another way we can do this is by using a single copy of Desecrated Tomb. Now, this card is a 3 mana artifact that has the ability of whenever 1 or more creatures leave your graveyard, create a 1/1 black creature token with flying. Now, I initially tried this deck by running nothing but Desecrated Tomb, and I was able to get board states where all of a sudden I have 150 tokens or more. The problem is they don't have haste. is that they have to sit on the battlefield. So I'm only running a single copy of this, and so we'll still be able to get our board full of creature tokens, either with Goblin Instigator or with Desecrated Tomb, but it's still just another way for us to win the game if Judith the Scourge Diva happens to die, and because it's a historic spell, it can bring back a number of our creatures to continue with the combo. Alongside these cards, we will be running a couple of cards for our card advantage engine, one of which will be 3 Sarkhan Fireblood. So for 1 red, we get a 3 loyalty planeswalker with the ability of +1. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And then you can also +1 to add 2 mana to cast a dragon. We're not running any dragons in this list, so that's kind of a moot point. And you can also -7 to get 4 5/5 dragon creatures onto the battlefield. We can use that to win the game. He can be an alternate win condition for us. However, we're mainly going to be using him for that discard draw card ability. We can pitch our creatures willy-nilly and get them back later whenever we cast things. So it's okay to discard things to the graveyard, we'll be able to get them back. In addition to that, we will be running 2 Bankrupt in Blood. So for 1 and a black, we get a sorcery that says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice 2 creatures, and then draw 3 cards. Now, I don't want to run a full playset or anything like that, but a couple of this I think is fine, because if we can sacrifice a Squee and then maybe a Goblin token or a Bat token or something like that, we can then be able to draw 3 cards, maybe do a couple of damage with our Judith to be able to find our combo pieces. I think this card's going to be important, and I think it's something that we should definitely consider running in our deck here. For our removal package, we'll be running 2 Bedevil and 2 Cast Down. Now, there are planeswalkers out there right now, and there are a few artifacts that we need to take care of. So I think Bedevil is going to be a great answer to those things, as well as just handling the generic creatures that are on the battlefield. And then the 2 Cast Downs, of course, destroy target non-legendary creature. A lot of the fast aggro lists that we may need to fight off against are going to be running a lot of non-legendary creatures, so this will be able to handle a lot of those. And then on top of that, we'll be running 4 Mortify, especially with Splendid Reclamation being in the meta game right now. Mortify is going to be extremely important to be able to catch that before the trigger goes off on the stack, so that way that it can't Nexus to Fate us at the end of turn or something like that. Mortify is going to be incredibly important, and I think it's one of those things that we definitely should be running a full playset of, which we are. Our mana base, we're actually running a 23 card mana base here. We're actually going to be running 4 Blood Crypt, 4 Sacred Foundry, 4 Clifftop Retreat, 4 Dragon Skull Summit, 2 Isolated Chapel, 2 Field of Ruin, and 3 Mountains. Now this mana base is a little bit wonky compared to what some other people may be running for a straight Mardu list. However, we are very heavy in the red, so we need as much red mana as we can possibly get. And then once we get the other mana sources, that'll be great. But really, we really need to focus on the red. For our sideboard, we actually have an interesting package here. So control is going to be one of our worst matchups. So we're going to have a lot of answers here for control. So we're going to have 2 Banefire in the list here, as well as 3 Duress. Now Duress is going to be really important to be able to hit those Cry of Canariums. It's going to be very important to hit the counter spells and other things like that. And then we're also going to be running Banefire, because we can go infinite with mana with this deck. So being able to have the ability to Banefire somebody lethally and uncounterably is going to be very important. We're also going to be running 2 Treasure Map against control, just for a way to filter the top of our library and then also be able to draw cards in the late game. And then in addition to this, we'll be running 2 Vraska's Contempt. This can also just be good against creature aggro lists, but it's mainly going to be there for more Planeswalker control. Finally, for up against the creature aggro lists, we're going to be running 2 Deafening Clarion, which can also give our creatures lifelink if we so need it, and then 1 Ritual of Soot. And then finally, we'll be running 3 Kaya Orzhov Usurper as again another way to win the game. But in addition to that, it just hates on graveyards so well, and it hates on mono blue so well. I think it's going to be very important for us to run this in our sideboard. Well guys, that's the list. What do you guys think? I've had the pleasure of playing this on Arena, and I gotta tell you, it's not really the best Arena deck because of all of the triggered abilities and everything like that. Instead, I think this is going to be a better F&M deck that you can bring with you. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I've had games where I've had over 250 tokens before. Basically, you can go infinite with this list and kill your opponent on the spot or get infinite tokens. There's a lot of fun play you can do with this, and I think it's going to be one of those ones that's going to surprise people if they haven't seen the combo before. Again, this is Debo over at lansego.com. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and I look forward to talking to you guys again soon.